Hey, man. So, I don't know if you know this, but December 19th will mark the 20th anniversary of the release of The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. Now, I'm a huge fan of these movies, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Uh, I love them. When I talk about like some of my favorite trilogies, it's hard for me to pick like a single favorite trilogy of films, but without a doubt, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is definitely up there. It's definitely like at the very tippity top. It's hard for me to pick one, but like it's close. I could almost say Lord of the Rings as my favorite film trilogy of all time. Um, so you saw this movie when it first came out in theaters, correct?
Correct. Yes, I did.
Uh, Now, were you familiar with Lord of the Rings beforehand? Like, did you grow up reading the books, or have you seen like any of the animated films that had been released before?
Um, my only introduction to Lord of the Rings prior was I was working at Hollywood video rental store at the time, and I had rented the animated VHSs from there, and so that's my familiarity. I wasn't into the books or anything, but I did really enjoy those. I knew the story somehow, I guess maybe other than there, but I was very pumped for this movie to come out at the time.
Nice, yeah. I never seen any of the animated films. Of course, we're talking about there was the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings animated film from the '70s, which adapted Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. And then there was the Rankin and Bass Hobbit, and they also did Return of the King. I had never seen any of those except for maybe about 5 minutes of the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings during a TV airing one night. It was like during prime time, and I watched about 5 minutes of it. And I remember my mom telling me that I had to go to bed, and she thought that it was probably going to be a little bit too adult for me, and kind of scared me. So I didn't watch the whole thing. But anyway, but other than that, I never read the books. Um, I'd heard of them, obviously. My biggest, the biggest thing for me with Lord of the Rings was actually a poster in Spencer's Gifts. You remember Spencer's Gifts, right?
Oh yeah, we still have one here.
Oh, nice.
One.
I know that might be one of the few in the country at this point. I don't know. But I remember there was a poster, and I can't remember the name of the artist right now. But it was a really beautiful poster with like this really nice drawing of Gandalf and Sam and Frodo. Um, then like the border has like some of the other characters like Gollum and stuff. And like I just the poster always sort of intrigued me. I always thought that was kind of interesting. And it, I don't know, something about Lord of the Rings and these like magical, mythical characters was always kind of appealing to me, and it sparked, it sparked my imagination. So yeah, so I never, so that I didn't really know the story or anything like that going into Fellowship of the Ring, but I know for me, it was a. I was very. The trailers had me anticipating for it because I remember they released like this one trailer that was supposed to hyping up the entire trilogy. Like the last shot is like this really cool shot. It's that shot from Fellowship of the Ring where the Fellowship comes up across like each one individually like comes up from behind like these rocks. And like as the Fellowship is doing that, like the titles of the other movies come up and like the release dates. So it's like it had like Fellowship 2001, Two Towers 2002. Return of the King 2003. So it was I could tell it was a big deal, and I was pretty hyped for it. So yeah, I loved. I saw it in theaters, and I absolutely loved it. I thought that it was really it was incredible. The visuals are amazing. I'll go into like more of a a review of it later. But what was your experience like seeing it in the theater, though?
So I remember being in high school and trying to get other people excited about this movie, because I mean, a very limited background on it, but it's like, it's got freaking elves and dwarves and wizards and magic and this crazy shit, and it's like, oh, this looks freaking phenomenal. And everybody's like, oh, it looks so nerdy. What a nerd movie. And it's like, right, yeah, it's awesome. Like, it it looks great. So I did manage to get a couple people to go, and I loved the movie. I remember when it was over, my mom's just like, that's it just ends, and it's like, yeah, it's a trilogy, bro. Like, like,
yeah, mom, bro.
Get your shit together.
Yeah, you noob.
I didn't know, however, that the animated movie was kind of like a combination of Two Towers and Fellowship. So when it ended, I was thinking, geez, there's so much more to this. Why did it end this way? So there wasn't really much story-wise that was necessarily new to me until like halfway through Two Towers, like whenever it kind of branches off from what the animated movies did, because I hadn't seen Return of the King, the animated one. I'd seen The Hobbit, and I'd seen the Fellowship animated movies. So, but yeah, no, I really enjoyed it. I was instantly very hard into Lord of the Rings at that point.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how the times have really changed. How your fellow students reacted. When you try to get them, excited for this movie, and they're like, "Oh, it's a nerd movie." Like now,
yeah, right.
Everybody would be like, flipping their shit about it. Now everybody would be like, "Oh, Lord of the Rings." Oh, like I've always been a big fan. Like, that wasn't the case in 2001.
Right.
It's a totally different landscape at that time.
Yeah, I mean, nerd stuff was still like a taboo thing at that point. We didn't have the Marvel Cinematic Universe and all this other like comic stuff and superhero stuff and nerd culture. That wasn't. I mean, I guess it probably existed. Like, there was conventions and things, but it was still very much, I mean, on the level of like LARPing is now, I guess, right? Like, it's still like this nerdy kind of, you're a dork thing.
It all kind of like sort of came out around the same time. Like just thinking back to it now, because like when Fellowship of the Ring came out in 2001, it was like the same year, around the same time, Harry Potter came out.
Mm-hmm.
And then in May of 2002, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man came out.
Yep.
It's like that time right there is really like when nerd culture really started to kind of like gain some steam and really started to take over. Because beforehand, all of your big blockbuster films were like, Will Smith and Independence Day, and it's like usually it was like a big star and some sort of big sci-fi action blockbuster. And now all of a sudden your big blockbusters are starting to become like these films based off like comic books and fantasy books, and they're making tons of money. And so I think that if you really wanted to go back and pinpoint like a time when like nerd culture really like took over and gave us what we now, I would almost have to say like 2000, like the end of 2001, beginning of 2002 is really when it started.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Nerd culture as a whole probably owes a lot to Lord of the Rings and, like you said, Harry Potter and Spider-Man and that, because I mean, just for those exact reasons. I don't remember after these movies coming out anyone really being like, oh, that's for dorks, like, not at all. Definitely before the movie came out, a lot of people told me that. But afterwards, after it was huge and came out and, broke records or whatever, I don't remember anyone kind of crapping on it in that way at all.
Exactly. I'm assuming it's just, what happened with like Lord of the Rings, and like before the movie came out, I'm sure like you would have gotten like picked on if you were caught reading one of the books in public or something, But it's the same thing with comic books too, because after Spider-Man, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's kind of cool that you read comic books, because now they're making these big blockbuster movies based on superheroes, so it's the same thing.
Yep. It is an interesting comparison, and I really probably wouldn't have thought of that unless you said it, but that's very true.
Yep. So, and I think another thing that really helped out with Lord of the Rings and its success is the fact that it is a really well-made film. They filmed all three of them kind of like at the same time. Obviously, they worked on Fellowship first, just so they could get it out, to make the 2001 release date. But at the same time, they were making the other two films, and I think that kind of if doing that, because they know like you can't just do one film. Now that I know what the trilogy of books was like, you can't just do one film and then just like, oh, we'll just make this movie, just kind of hope that it does well, maybe we'll do the other two. It's like, no, it's like you have to do all three books. You have to try to adapt all three of them. There's just no way. You can't just take one of them and then just maybe go back and revisit it later on. So I'm glad that they did what they did, and it kind of helps maintain the sort of level of quality with each film too, because I love Fellowship of the Ring, but like honestly, like, all three of them are just so well done and so well made. Everything from like the cast and the writing and the special effects. I watched these films last year, and twice actually last year, and the special effects to me still really hold up. Even some of the CGI, while sometimes it doesn't look quite as good as some of today's CGI, it still doesn't look bad. It's not like egregiously like awful or anything like that,
Yeah, oh yeah, I agree. And the use of practical effects whenever possible, I think really helped that trilogy. Where I feel like years from now, it's really going to separate itself from the Hobbit trilogy, just because of that, just because of the immense amount of practical effects they used in Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, like you go like if you watch Lord of the Rings and then you go and watch the Hobbit trilogy, it's a stark contrast, because the Lord of the Rings use the proper amount of each one. Like they use practical effects, they use miniatures, they use prosthetics. But then also when they couldn't use any of those, then they used CGI. And they also used forced perspective in terms of like the humans with the hobbits and the size difference and everything. But then you watch The Hobbit and just about everything is CGI in that film. And honestly, like, I don't think it looks nearly as appealing as the stuff in Lord of the Rings does.
No, I agree. And not to branch too far off from Fellowship, but to me the big push for The Hobbit was the fact that it was filmed at the frame rate that it was filmed at. But that frame rate was only ever noticeable in theaters on certain screens. So I don't even know if you can watch it in that frame rate anymore anywhere. So it's like the entire...
So if you buy the...
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you buy the Blu-ray, it doesn't say like 48 frames per second. You just buy the Blu-ray and that's it.
Right, and it definitely was a sight to behold in theaters, but that was the main draw of the film once it was over, because like it was just another cookie cutter CGI Hollywood movie, and it wasn't this huge monumental timeless thing that the Lord of the Rings trilogy was.
Exactly. But just to get back to Fellowship of the Ring and just kind of finish this topic off.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have like a favorite character or a favorite moment in Fellowship of the Ring?
I was going to ask you kind of the same thing. The bad thing is it reminds me of Ninja Turtles in a way, because you don't want to say you dislike anybody or that this person's your least favorite, because it's like, well, now I love all of these characters. The like chemistry that they all have together is what makes the film. So you can't have one without the other. Overall, if I had to pick one, I think I'm a Legolas fan. You're a Gimli guy, aren't you?
Honestly, actually, no. He's not my favorite character.
Okay.
I do like him.
Yeah.
More so in Fellowship of the Ring. We'll be talking about the Lord of the Rings movies again some other time, and I can kind of get into more of why I prefer Gimli in the first film as opposed to Gimli in the other two.
Mm-hmm.
But no, actually, my favorite character would have to be Sam.
Weird.
Because he is the real hero of the film.
Yeah.
Of the series. If you look at the whole series, he becomes. But also, I'm a big Sean Astin fan. I've liked him since Goonies and Rudy, and of course he did the voice of Raphael in the Nickelodeon Ninja Turtle series.
Toy soldiers.
That's right. That's right. That too.
Yeah.
And Encino Man. But he's got such a likable personality, and he's such a loyal guy. You wish that you want Sam as a friend. You just want, because he's just always going to be there for you, looking out for you and taking care of you, and he's always there to help out. So I don't know. He's such a cool dude. So I would have to say Sam, and I also, if not Sam, I also really love Gandalf. I mean,
right.
anytime I see Kellen show up as Gandalf with the pointy wizard's hat, like I'm down for it. Like he's such an amazing actor, and Gandalf is such a well-written character, and so interesting and so much fun. I don't know. Those two are definitely my favorites.
Gandalf would be my close second to Legolas, I think. I mean, for all the reasons you said, and the casting was freaking just spot on, perfect. There's nothing I could have done if I would have had a magic lamp to witch a better casting for Gandalf. Period.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as favorite moments go, there's a lot of great moments in Fellowship. So what? I mean, you go first, and then I'll think.
Okay. Well, it's tough because for me to choose one, because Fellowship actually is my favorite entry in the trilogy. It's the only movie where, well, obviously except for at the very end of Return of the King, but it's the only one where the Fellowship is actually all together. Right. Spoiler alert, because they branch out at the end. But I love the fact that the Fellowship is all together in the first one, but also I love the beginnings of a journey sometimes. Like sometimes I feel like the things that get set in motion and create this journey, and to see the people come together and like start to go out, like it can be the most interesting part of a story for me, at least in my opinion. But then also like there's just some really great action set pieces in that film too. I love the scene on Weathertop when they get attacked by the Nazgul up there, and I love when they're fighting. Everything in Moria is amazing. Like once the orcs start like hear them, when Pippin knocks the skeleton into the well, and then all of a sudden all the orcs start coming out. It's just balls to the walls action for like the next 20 minutes, because then they're getting chased, and then like they're fighting the cave troll, and then they're coming face to face with the Belrock on the bridge. It's just like it's awesome. That whole sequence I think is amazing. And then I also like at the end with I love Aragorn fighting off all of those Orokai. Like I think that's just a badass fight scene with some really cool sword play, and then of course the moment with like Boromir getting turned into a pincushion is really kind of heart wrenching. So it's tough for me to pick one favorite, but if I had to, and I would have to say like I love everything in Moria. That's probably my favorite stuff. It's some of my favorite stuff in the entire trilogy.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, if I would probably say the same thing. The Mines of Moria, that whole sequence is fantastic, and I would mention, Lord of the Rings is these movies, there's 3 of them, and they're all long as hell, right? Which is off-putting to a lot of people.
Especially if you watch the extended cuts, too.
Right, yeah. They're, over 3 hours, each of them, correct? At least the extended, at least, is over 3 hours on all of them.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, the Mines of Moria is a very long action sequence. So I do really like that. That's probably the scene that I think of whenever I first think of Fellowship of the Ring in my head. So probably that. But even the parts that aren't like action oriented, I used to turn on Fellowship of the Ring to fall asleep all the time, and I'd fall asleep around the same part. But like the whole opening to that movie and like the origin of everything is so well done. The scenery is gorgeous.
You bring up a good point. Like, yeah, I was mentioning a lot of the big action set pieces, but even the stuff like in the Shire, I love too. Like Bilbo's birthday and Gandalf first coming into Hobbiton. Like, even that's all like really like entertaining and really well done stuff. and then like when they have to go to Rivendell to heal Frodo, like when they have the secret meeting to discuss the fate of the ring. Like I don't know, there's lots of other great scenes in the film besides the big action set pieces. And you're right, like that beginning, the whole intro with like setting up like the history, and like you see like the big battle with Sauron, and we get our first kind of glimpses of Gollum, which I always liked that we didn't see all of Gollum until the second film. Like in the first film, you just see like him in the shadows and bits and pieces of it, but it wasn't until the second, until Two Towers that you really got your first full look at Gollum. So I always thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, you're right. That's another great scene. Whenever they're having like the council meeting, deciding about putting together the Fellowship, I freaking love that scene. It's so well done. This movie does a really good job. Well, all the movies do a really good job of portraying emotion. Whenever Frodo offers to take the ring, Gandalf's reaction to that, you feel exactly what he's feeling every time you watch it. The part where the hobbits are hiding under the hill from the Ringwraith, from the Nazgul.
Oh yeah, that's an amazing scene. I love that scene.
It's so good. It is so good. So it's weird because you probably don't even pick up. At least most people don't pick up when you're watching it what's so good about a scene, but everything from the camera shots to the lighting to everything is so professionally done and purpose driven. There's a reason why these movies are are what they are.
If anybody has never seen like the behind the scenes making of Lord of the Rings, like if you got the Blu-rays or the DVDs and they have the bonus features that have all the behind the scenes stuff, watch it, check it out. Or even like you can find some of this stuff on YouTube. It is just fascinating, utterly fascinating to watch how they were able to pull off a lot of the stuff that they did. And it's almost like there were, this was Peter Jackson's first like really big budget movie. And like he was going into this with sort of a low budget mentality, like trying to like do as much stuff as he could with like without spending nearly as much money as they needed to. That's why you get so many like miniatures as opposed to fancy CGI locations and stuff like that. Minas Tirith is most of the shots of that are miniature as opposed to a CGI. So but yeah, I encourage anyone to watch the making of behind the scenes features for these films, because I think it's just really fascinating to watch how they were able to pull off all this stuff and do it in 2001 without CGI looking the way it does now. You know what I'm saying? Correct.
Right. Yep. Oh, I agree. These are like there are certain things where it's like I don't really care about the behind the scenes stuff all the time, but Lord of the Rings is one that you should definitely, if you care at all, watch the behind the scenes stuff on, because it's really kind of fascinating what they were able to accomplish.
Yeah. If like you're interested in filmmaking at all, like if that sort of stuff really interests you, then yeah, definitely check it out, because they show you like everything, like even like some of like the test footage that Peter Jackson did when they were just creating the Shire and Hobbiton. Like they were just like taking a video camera and like a VHS camcorder and just kind of like doing some real quick test shots. They show you, like, you get a really in-depth look at how they did this, and it's really really cool, really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing I will say about Fellowship, I love Fellowship also. It's hard for me to pick a favorite of the trilogy, but I've definitely seen Fellowship more than I have the other two. But the extended versions of the three films, I would say that the other two are an absolute must. If you're going to watch these, if you're going to watch it for the first time, or if you've seen the other ones a lot, if you've never seen, any way at all, if you've never seen the extended versions, watch the extended versions. The extended Fellowship might not be as necessary, because a lot of the added scenes in Fellowship are not so important, I guess, to leave in as an extent.
That's kind of true. Yeah. They're not like a lot of the extended stuff and the other two movies are a little bit more essential. Like I really feel like they needed to be in there. Some of the stuff in Fellowship probably didn't. You're right, but I will also say though that as far as all three extended versions go, Fellowship also does at least have the least amount. Like it wasn't quite as long as the other two. There wasn't nearly as much extended stuff, so at least like there's that. Whereas like even if like you didn't watch the extended, you just watched the theatrical version, you're not missing a lot, like in terms of like actual like minutes of extended footage.
Exactly, and that's my point. If I watch Lord of the Rings again, I'm gonna watch the extended one. But if I would say you have to watch the extended versions of the other two because there's plot elements in it. This one, the stuff they cut out was just stuff they cut out, and it's nice to see it in there, but you don't have to watch that.
I think, really, honestly, there's only one scene in Fellowship of the Ring that was extended, that wasn't the theatrical version, that was a little bit more, that is kind of important. I think it was just when, I think Frodo gets the cloak of invisibility from Lady Galadriel. In Lothlorien, because that does play a part in the Two Towers. And if you didn't see that in the Fellowship and then you watched Two Towers, you might be kind of like confused as to why Frodo has a cloak of invisibility. But honestly, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, there's is that the name of the elf place? Linen? I don't know it.
Lothlorien? Yeah, I believe that's. Yeah.
That's.
Because there's two like elf locations that they go to.
Okay.
There's Rivendell, which has Elrond, and then Lothlorien, which has Lady Galadriel.
Correct. I'm trying to think, but I think it's Lothlorien that they extended a lot. There's a lot of like Gimli stuff in Fellowship in the extended version in that area.
That's right.
Okay. Yep. It is long. It is. I mean, in retrospect, it's probably not that long. It's like probably like a couple minutes. But I remember watching it like, okay, I probably didn't need all of this in this movie. But it's because there's not even dialogue. It's just like him staring, and there's just like a lot of extended shots.
I will say that that sequence is. I don't think it's bad. I'm definitely not saying it's bad. But as far as like, it's probably my least favorite stuff in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like we get to Lothlorien, I'm like, okay, this is good, but I'm kind of looking forward to getting past it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No. Yeah, I agree.
It does go a little bit long, and but it's good. Just not my favorite.
Right. It's gorgeous. The scenery's gorgeous. It's just there's an awful lot of just long shots of scenery and things, and it's like. I don't need this.
Yeah, it's good. It's just, it can kind of drag a little. So
yeah,
I totally agree with you. But all right, man. Well, I think this was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
this was good. We are definitely going to revisit Lord of the Rings at another date. So why don't we just go ahead and put a pin on this topic for today and say that Fellowship of the Ring, happy 20th birthday. We love you.
Peace out, Fellowship.
Lord of the Rings is the #1 trilogy. Ask anybody and they know the dilly. From Jacksonville to Manila, Philly. Ask all the fishes, the seaweed, the krill. Lord of the Rings is the #1 trilogy. Lord of the Rings is the #1 trilogy. Lord of the Rings is the #1 trilogy. Trilogy.